So as promised, let's kick things off. Feel free to turn your videos feeds on if you want, just so everyone can see you. Keen to try and make this as interactive as possible. But yeah, if you could keep yourself on mute though, unless you're speaking, that would be great, just so we try and keep the audio quality as good as possible. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the very first monthly call of our new UK Association of Trail Association Bike Parks. Catch your name, TBC. So, I mean, just to set the scene a bit, there are 125 groups that have said yes to being members of this new association. But obviously that encompasses quite a wide spectrum of different groups. So if you look at I suppose if you like the Trail Association axis, you've got trail associations like Ride Mendips, who we'll hear from later, like Peak District MTB, hi Chris, and various other trail associations around the UK that have been around a long time. They're properly constituted as a charity. They run regular dig days. They've got plenty of volunteers on hand. They're really quite well organised and well set up. But at the other end of the spectrum, you've got a few trails that some guys have built in the woods in a Facebook group. And we've got everything in between. And if you look at the other axis, which is bike parks, you know, you've got everything from Bike Park Wales and Revolution and Danny Hart's Descend at one end of the spectrum, and at the other end of the spectrum, you know, you've got you know, a small field in Norfolk and some jumps and one trail around the edge, and they're pretty much doing it for the love. They're certainly not doing it for the money. So you know, there's a lot of variation, you know, between us all. There's also a lot of shared problems and issues that we all encounter, and that's one of the primary goals we have of the Alliance is to focus on knowledge sharing, is to really, you know, rather than let everyone, you know, succeed or fail in reinventing the wheel every time they come up against a problem, but really to try and help each other out by sharing knowledge across the network of groups across the UK. So that, you know, everyone's lives get a bit easier and we actually get a bit more time to focus on the trails themselves rather than the boring admin work, if that makes sense. So, you know, the plan is to use these calls every month as one of those message of knowledge sharing. And, you know, we'll try and pick an interesting and relevant speaker each month. Hopefully has things to share that we can all take something away from. We're lucky to be kicking things off with a talk from Grant this month. The co-founder and chair of Ride Mendips, who I'll hand over to in a second. He'll talk for about half an hour, and then we'll open the floor to questions. If you could use the little hands up button at the bottom of your screen, just so I know you've got a question to ask, and I'll call on you. When you're asking a question, just remember to introduce yourself and also the group that you're from, because that'll be really useful for everyone to understand who's here and get everyone's different perspectives on stuff. And then once we've worn out Grant with questions, I'll then open the floor to ask questions of everyone. So people, you know, really, and then we'll see how this goes. Obviously, this is the first time we've done this, so this is very much a work in progress. We bear this all, but hopefully, you know, we can find a format where actually, you know, we can ask questions to the floor and someone that's got an answer to that question can answer it. And also that's a chance for you guys to ask me, you know, what I've been up to each month and, you know, any questions you have about the Central Association and what's going on and the work that's being done. So, without further ado, I will hand over to Grant.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks, Robin. I'll share my screen. I have prepared some slides. Can you see that? Not quite sure. Oh, brilliant. Okay. So yeah, I'm Grant. I'm chairman of Ride Mendips. Robin's basically asked me to just talk through a bit of kind of the history of Ride Mendips. You know, why it came about, what's happened, some of the ups and downs, some of the challenges we faced. And really my sort of self-interested point of view is that to actually sort of throw some of the challenges we've got at the moment out there and see if people have already got some solutions for some of those problems, which are certainly keen to understand what happens at the latter part of the discussion. And I've thrown kind of a picture up here of some of our committee members. It's changed over the years, but, you know, it's a relatively small group. And that's Nikki, our kind of beat ranger at one of our committee meetings. So in terms of where we are, so the Mendip Hills is kind of like half an hour south of Bristol, and we're focused in that area. it's pretty broad. If I zoom in a bit, it goes all the way from kind of Weston-super-Mare, Chew Magna, down to Wells, and it's a designated area of outstanding natural beauty. And there's loads of kind of like points of interest in there. You've got loads of National Trust sites, forest, woods. You've got obviously Cheddar Gorge in there. And as an organisation, we kind of put on our website some of the open access bridleways and things that, you know, some beautiful routes through there. And one thing I probably would point out is there's a kind of very major footpath walkway called the West Mendip Way that runs through this red box, which is where we're kind of interested in. So there's a lot of walkers end up going through the areas we're in, as well as mountain bikers. If I zoom in one more stage, so Roebuck Forest is primarily what we're interested in. So unusually, perhaps for others, this isn't owned by Forestry England. It's actually a privately owned woodland, but it's managed by Forestry England. And that's this bottom section here, the sort of heart-shaped bit. And directly above it is a kind of SSI site, like an old Iron Age fort. And so there's loads of relevant bits. And to the right-hand side here, this is sort of Blackdown. It's kind of open access area. So there's loads of mountain biking opportunities around here. And if I go back 5 years plus, so there's been trails. I mean, I've grown up in Cheddar, so as long as I can remember, since the 90s, there's been wild trails in Roebuck Warren. They've moved around all over the place at various stages in the history. They've been of differing quality. But the thing that's been relatively consistent is the amount of people that use this forest. So as I said, it's kind of one of the main areas of the West Mendip Way. You've got a lot of local people walking in the area. You've got a lot of horse riders. There's a trekking centre, so they're taking commercially every weekend groups of non-experienced riders through the woods. You've got mountain bikers in the day. There's quite a lot of night riding goes up in the woods. And then perhaps more unusually up there, the extra stakeholder we've got is a pheasant shooting club who've been there for many years. And they've got 2 enormous pheasant pens up in the forest. And as I said, perhaps the unusual thing is that this isn't owned by Forestry England. It's actually owned by a couple who live in the southeast. And really, their main concern is just to minimise hassle, right? They don't generate really any meaningful income out of the forest, and really they just don't want any troubles. But unfortunately, over the years, because of the number of stakeholders and the fact that it's not really you do get points of conflict. And so, for example, some of the wild trails exit on bridleways, you know, and therefore there's the opportunity for mountain bikers to collide with walkers, horse riders. You have the shooting club running shoots, sometimes shooting across what are wild trails over in the years. And really it's just a bit of a mess. And there are significant incidents that have happened up there with some pretty serious arguments between different groups. And then the other thing I'd kind of point out is some of the features that we had in the old days up there. So this kind of wooden ramp was like a staple of one of the trails. The wooden ramp actually used to move around. So sometimes you could be night riding and it wouldn't be where it was the week before. We had the old bit of metal, which was pig pen, which was interesting going over in the dark. And there were sort of similar types of features around the woodland. And what tended to happen was a bit of a cycle. So we were riding up there, you know, every week, and you'd find you'd go up and the trails had been ripped to pieces by Forestry England, and you have these kind of signs up and all the red and white tape everywhere. And typically the cycle that had happened is the one stakeholder, walkers, horse riders, or the pheasant shoot. Typically, the pheasant shoot had complained to either Forestry England or the owners, and then Forestry England had destroyed the features in the trails. And this happened probably every, I don't know, 4 to 6 months, something would happen. And one evening we were up there, and one of the favourite trails we were riding at the time, this has happened to. And in the pub afterwards, we just sort of decided, well, is there anything we can do about it? We didn't know anything about any of the stakeholders or anything I've put on the slide now. We were just people who went up riding in the woods and had done for a long time. So if I flip back here, so what ended up happening in 2018 was I started reaching out to different groups. So there was a number of groups I had, like Facebook group pages or something else, or I knew someone who cycled with someone else. And I started floating the idea. So I've got Heath, picture of here, Stuart. So they're both members of our committee and other stakeholders. And I'd go riding with them, see what they thought about the idea. And there was sort of general feeling that, yeah, this would be great. But there was also a bit of a defeatist attitude that it's pretty unlikely that anything's going to happen because it's been like this for years, and I don't think anything will ever change. But we managed to sort of get consensus to give it a go. And also at the time, I reached out to the FE and got contacted by a lady called Jess. She was actually on a secondment at the time and was quite keen to sort of make an impact. And she actually facilitated a meeting between our sort of fledgling group of people, the landowners and the shooting club. So that was kind of mid-year. And in the lead up to that, we'd had discussions about the possibilities of what we could do. And we agreed there we'd have a 1-year trial where we could have 2 official trails in the woodland. So we, off the back of that, went away, started making plans of what those trails would be. We formalised Ride Mendips as a small charity. It's probably worth pointing out at that point, it wasn't a registered charity, it was just a small charity. So we kind of looked on the Charities Commission website, taken some template constitution documents and set up a committee, so at least we had some structure, but it wasn't a formal registered charity, so there was no sort of protection as a charity at that point. And we also set up a website, set up social media, did a bit of an online fundraising thing, so we raised about £1,000 online to buy some tools. We also did a funding application with the Mendip Hills Fund and got £1,000 to put up signs. So that got us started, and then in sort of February time 2019 is when we actually started doing something on the ground. So we ran a series of dig days, probably from February till about August. And basically all we did was we defined what we'd have as the 2 official, to show in a minute. And we linked up as many of the wild trails that were already there into two long runs with some spurs. And that kind of maximised what we could do within the areas we were given at permission to do anything. And we also, by the end of the year, got the signs installed at both trailheads, and we got, I think it was 150 trail marker posts put up. So it all looked pretty official by the end of the year. And this is kind of what we ended up with. So we tried to maximise everything we could do. If I sort of look on the right-hand side, this sort of bluey green darker area here, these were the areas we weren't able to do anything in. And the reason for that is there's 2 very large pheasant pens up there, and those are the areas that they shoot in. So it's just not feasible to do in there. And there were also some issues with badger sets and other things in some of the other areas. So we were given these kind of limited areas to do things with. But fortunately, those were 2 of the main areas for a lot of the trails. So we kind of linked up, and you can see here we kind of had spurs and where we could make the most of different things, and also with a bit of an eye to the future, where these areas have limited crossings over bridleways, so there is the opportunity to put more things in the future, you know, depending on how successful we were. So I know this is very busy, but it can, and the chart at the bottom is supposed to sort of indicate the kind of how we were feeling, like the mood and the sort of progress of the committee. So we were on a bit of the high at the end of 2019. We got the trails up and running, it's all official, got the signs up, and we were kind of getting set up for 2020. And then Forestry England started to do some felling work, and they felled the top of 2 of the trails. So those were closed for a number of weeks, and there was kind of brash all over the trails. And we were sort of a bit disappointed by the fact we got permission, and we were sort of already facing some obstacles from Forestry England. Then we ran our first dig day in February, and basically COVID happened. So all our plans kind of went out of the window for all of the digging that year. And at the same time, the number of mountain bikers, and I'm sure this happened in a lot of places, started to go through the roof. So everyone during COVID could, you know, do their bit of exercise. All the bike parks were shut, and everyone went to their local trail. And because this was now kind of signposted, there was a lot of people in the woods. And I'd say the number of users doubled, possibly tripled. And the problem that caused us was the local residents perceived the increase in mountain biking as purely to do with the fact the trails have become official. And the way they tried to stop it all was they complained to the police about near death experiences with mountain bikers. They complained to the parish council, to the district council, Somerset County Council, UK Cycling, British Cycling, the Horse Association. And so at that point, we just got this deluge of complaints and contacts from all these different people. I was rung up by the police repeatedly, and it was a bit of a stressful time, to be honest. But what, funnily enough, happened during that period was every stakeholder we engaged with, we'd explain what we were doing. You know, we're trying to make this more safe, more standardized, improved for everybody in the forest, and you kind of won over each stakeholder one by one. So by the end of it, we actually had, you know, quite a lot of advocates for what we were doing within these organizations, which was great. And I don't know if he's on now, but Kieran from UK Cycling was really helpful, because I know the local residents reached out to him, and he contacted me to say, do you know all these people are being contacted about this stuff, which was really helpful to work with the Forestry England. And in the end, the local residents were kind of left with an avenue of raising objections through information requests to the FE. So, and it has settled down. You know, since then the number of users has dropped, and I think people have become used to the fact that this is a better solution to what was there before. But it was very stressful. And at the same time, we had planned to install speed control features on the bridleway crossings, but we couldn't do it because it was lockdown. So the FB actually put some funding towards a contractor, and we put in these speed control features all the crossing points. So at that point, it was probably the safest it had ever been, to be honest. In parallel, I haven't majored on that, but the other big project we decided to work on, crazily, was to put in a pump track in Cheddar in the village. So we were doing a lot of fundraising events. So Jack, who lives in the village, is in Reef, did a couple of gigs. We raised some money. We got a lot of support in the community. I was doing assemblies at the local school, and all the kids were getting really excited about a pump track. We were doing applications to grants for money and applying to companies for things. So what we decided to do at that point was shift from being a small charity, which is unregistered, to a proper registered CIO. And that was a bit of an administrative pain at the time to do, but it wasn't too bad. But the benefit of doing it was massive. So I think, A, it helped us get loads of funding because we were a legitimate organisation with accountability to the Charities Commission. And B, it provided us, which we were a bit more worried about given all the complaints, some kind of protection as a legal entity from people, you know, challenging us. So we became a registered CIO, and we started applying for funding for the pump track. And then things kind of got worse, because what unfortunately happened was Forestry England decided to clear fell, I'd say one half of one of the two trails we had. A third of the other one was not clear fells, but was felled, and it basically completely destroyed all the effort we'd done in that area. And it was no joke when we went up there. It was horrible. It just looked like the Battle of the Somme. It was just a mud bath, and you couldn't even see where the trail was. You could barely recognize what the woodland was. And that was just really disappointing, having gone through all this process, made the trails, and it just felt, you know, you weren't getting the support really that you wanted. And I think at the beginning of 22, there was a time when we just thought, oh, should we pack this in? Is it really worth bothering? But fortunately, we've had a lot of success on our other project. So to do with the pump track, we got planning permission. We'd raised probably at that stage about £100,000, and we were really motoring. So that gave us some motivation locally and a lot of support from people. And what was really nice actually through that period, as I received several emails from people who kind of said, these trails have, you know, kept my mental health in check during lockdown. Without them, I would have been lost, right? So it's quite encouraging on that side. So we started again, sort of pulled ourselves up together and started rebuilding the trails in 2021. We did quite a few dig days, and we made some progress, so they were in a reasonable state. And then we met with Forestry England the end of 22 with sort of plans for the future. And Matt Coxhead, our kind of like trail maintenance lead, actually attended one of the trail management courses, so we paid for him to go on that. It was at that point we decided, rather than have people bring their own tools to dig days, we'd buy our own ones, because people were turning up with, you know, mattocks where the end would fall off and all sorts of stuff like that. So we raised some more money, got all our own tools, got a place to store it all, which we were paying for every month. And then we ran another, you know, good load of dig sessions through 22. And I think probably, you know, middle of 22, the trails were in the best state they'd been perhaps ever, right? We'd had the chance to really do that. And the really heartening thing was the pump track opened. So we had this massive event in the village, hundreds and hundreds of people turned up, and it was fantastic. Loads of kids, we've got loads of stuff to give away, and they were loving it. They all knew who Ride Mendips were. All of them wanted to come on dig sessions. So it was really encouraging. And kind of going into 2023 or before that, one of the issues we face is we can't store anything on site. So we're kind of completely reliant on the dig leaders to have a van, shove all the tools in cheddar from a storage facility and take them up, dish them out and take them all back, which is pretty time consuming. And if we can't get someone with the van, we can't run the dig day. So what we're trying to do, which we've got planning permission for now, is to put a storage container in the forest. That's been a heck of a process. We started off with an application for a shipping container, which was rejected on the grounds of what it looked like, which is fair enough. It's beautiful woods. Then we were asked to put a building around the shipping container, which was a wooden shed. Didn't pass first time. Now we've got what looks like a Hansel and Gretel hut with a cedar roof in the planning, which has been approved. It's going to cost a fortune. It's going to cost thousands and thousands of pounds to build a wooden shed, and we'll store the tools in a shipping container inside. But that's the only way we can get tools on site and get it through planning. But it really means that we can then kind of like have more dig leaders, because we're not relying on people to be able to get stuff into the woods. Kind of fundamental for the kind of longer term future of Ride Mendips, even though it's going to cost a bomb. Yeah, and then first half of this year we did another load of, you know, decent dig sessions, and we got permission now, because up until this point we weren't allowed to use imported materials. It was all just what we could find. So we got like a load of gravel dumped up there. The quarry gave us we're quite fortunate in Cheddar, there's a lot of quarries. We got a load of gravel for free. We also got some piping, which we've started to put in and experiment with drainage up there. So again, going into this winter, the trails are probably as good as they've been and starting to drain. They're not perfect. It's very muddy up there, but they're a lot better than they have been. But what's kind of happened, unfortunately, now is we're sort of facing some challenges again, I would say, and the kind of sentiment's starting to drop. So our agreement, which we did originally back in 2018, was a 1 year rolling agreement, and we kind of re-signed in kind of September time each year. It didn't really change, and a few years ago, there was sort of noted the idea that we're going to need to change this to a more standardized contract. We have rolled it on a few years, but it's now expired, and it's kind of been expired for a lengthy period of time. And the other thing is, our dig leaders had first aid training a few years back, which is valid for 3 years, which was paid for by Forestry England. Now that's all expired, so we don't currently have any first aid trained dig leaders, and we're also being asked to do more things in terms of training for dig leaders and put more things in place around safeguarding, volunteer management, etc., etc. So there's a lot of other requirements coming, and it feels a bit like an administrative mountain at the moment to get started for 2024. And with that, we then last week, unfortunately, had another FE contractor trash the bottom end of one of our trails. And so after all of this, it's pretty galling that this can still happen. And, you know, I sent an email last week. I still haven't heard anything back. It's just a bit frustrating. And so going into next year, we're a bit worried that, A, we're even going to be able to run dig days. You know, and there currently is one trail at the bottom which is completely unsafe of 2, which is a bit disappointing. So it's a lot of talking, but that's kind of the history of where we've been. There's been a lot of ups and downs, but you know, generally we're fairly organised. And I thought I'd throw this up as a last slide, and I'm sure people probably face the same problems. none of us were experts in any of this, and we kind of figured it out as we went along. At the moment, obviously, as I said, we've got this new agreement that we need to figure out to get signed up. Otherwise, we can't do anything next year. We'd really like to get safeguarding in place. The amount of young people that contact me about wanting to do dig days, wanting to do it as their D of volunteering. My daughter's actually 14, so she's just starting a D of All her mates that go mountain biking want to help. But we can't really do that unless we get all of that in place and get all our leaders DBS checked, and it's just more and more admin. Then there's funding. Our storage facility's kind of gone up in cost to now like £100 and something a month, which is massive, which makes the cost of the shipping container and the shed sound not so bad over a few years. But still, we need the funding to do that. Fortunately, we've got enough left at the moment, but it'll quickly start draining. Then there's all the sort of governance, making sure we keep fulfilling the Charities Commission requirements in terms of what we have to do and reporting, financial reporting each year. There's dig leaders. So we only currently have 2 main dig leaders, myself and Matt, which makes it really difficult. And last year, when one of us couldn't do it, you just have to cancel. So what we'd like to do is have more qualified dig leaders. There's sure plenty of people who are keen to do it, but we need to get them first aid trained and jump through all the hoops. Then there's all the volunteer recruitment. We're quite fortunate, actually. Our social media's got thousands of people on it, and we always get a good solid bunch of recruits. The other thing to do, which some of our recruits did last year, was do volunteering as work volunteering. Some companies allow you to do that, but it'd mean running things in the middle of the week, which is impossible for us, but maybe an avenue. Then we're sort of increasingly worried about some of the liability stuff to do with the new agreement. And finally, dig day insurance. I think it's probably, I don't know where everyone is with their insurance, but when we started off, we got a quote of 450 quid for our 1 year dig day insurance. We managed to get that down to 90 quid now. So I don't know who everyone else uses, but top tip, Zurich's pretty good for getting a decent price for the dig day insurance. But my shout out here, is if you've got some ideas for some of these problems, then shout. I'd love to hear, particularly about safeguarding and some of your experiences with training up new dig leaders. I'm here to answer any questions if anyone's got any questions about our experience.
Cool, thank you, Grant. That was really good. Could you stop sharing your screen just so everyone can see each other again? And yeah, who's got any questions for Grant? Go ahead, Chris. Ooh.
It wasn't so much a question straight off the background. It was you're not alone in having all these feelings about the work you do. It sounded almost biographical for some of the issues that we face, not leave those with the FE obliterating things, just going through and seemingly enjoying it. So I just want to say thank you very much for this. It's nice to know we're not alone.
Grant, you're cool. You turned it off.
I was figuring out how to do it. There we go.
Who else had a question? Someone else did.
Tim.
Go on,
hand up. Yeah, Tim Foster from Revolution Bike Park. Again, not necessarily anything particularly sort of helpful, but I kind of first want to sort of again commend the journey you've gone through. We've had similar difficulties in a different remit, being a sort of private operation, but it seems like nothing in this world is easy. I think I kind of wanted to make a point that we often hear this conversation about sort of the problem of wild building and landowners having great concerns over wild building and things like that, and my response to that has always been the same thing, which is manage the problem, don't just try and sweep it away. And clearly from the early part of your story there, you went through years of what the world looks like when you just try and put a stop to wild building. But when you have something that human beings want to do, just telling them you can't do this is probably not an effective result. So sort of good on you for doing the right thing and essentially putting yourselves forward as saying, well, we will actually take on this problem and manage it on behalf of the stakeholders and and the landowners. And I think that's sort of whether it's helpful or not, whether people will remember that, you know, before you came along, it was a much worse situation, and it's within everyone's interest to sort of work with you to provide these solutions, as opposed to, you know, trying to make your life difficult. You know, when it comes to getting your trails destroyed, you know, obviously we've had a significant experience of that recently with the sort of Tyre bike park being destroyed, albeit at our own sort of doing. And I appreciate when you talked about how soul destroying it was to go up there and see all your hard work sort of turned into a wasteland. I can certainly sort of sympathize with that. The only thing practical advice I guess I could offer was regarding the safeguarding, which is not something that, you know, I'm particularly familiar with, although I've been doing work recently with our local school, which actually has some trails around it, and we've been sort of supporting the redevelopment of them under the guise of a community club. And part of that will be the need for sort of safeguarding officers and things like that. And we met with Cycling Wales, who sort of talked a little bit about that. And from what they described, it's not a particularly onerous process. There's a sort of a 1 day or, you know, sort of level training, which costs, you know, less than £100 kind of thing. And that provides you with the, you know, obviously the information you need and the sort of cover to be able to offer those kind of services. So I'm not sure how much you've looked into it, but there was also granted through Cycling Wales, but there was funding available to cover that cost. So
that's Welsh cycling, is it, Tim?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, which obviously British cycling in England and Scottish cycling in Scotland. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, obviously they you know, the road and track cyclists are looking after groups of kids all the time, so it sort of makes sense. Bern, you had a question.
I would say to your point about wild trails, we always made it clear we weren't going to use volunteers to shut wild trails. So our argument to the FE and the landowners were, we'll make the official trails as good as possible and attract people to those rather than shutting the wild trails. And there was a bit of skepticism about that, but I think over time it's proven pretty successful. There's still wild trails there. By and large, people are using the official trails. And the way we kind of proved that was taking screenshots of the Strava heat map, like over a number of months and years, and you can kind of see the concentration of usage focused on the main trails. I'd love to be able to actually have the paid access to sort of, because we can only take screenshots, but that was a fairly convincing argument for the FE that it was working.
Bern, you had a question?
Yeah, Grant Byrne McClure, chair the KFL Mountain Bike Club in Belfast. I commend you for all the work you've done and the efforts. We've had a very, very similar story to what you have had with our own club, and we're just finishing off a pilot, which we agreed with the landowner for a 2-year pilot. Similar places, loads of wild trails, but we picked one trail, which was the least controversial one, and we did a lot of work on it, got the signage and what have you done, and a similar story as well. We became a registered charity and had to do a lot of capacity building and also outreach work, similar to what you've had to do with we had to basically make friends with our opponents and become their allies. But I suppose just one specific question I was wanting to ask you in relation to insurance, because we're with Zurich and we're paying £450 a year, and it's just for now, whether whenever I was setting up the insurance policy, I think they did offer me various degrees, but basically I was erring on the side of caution. And it just basically said, look, if somebody drops a pickaxe in somebody's toe, I want us to be covered. And they said, yep, that's £450. Now that's just for the trail building. The landowner has retained, it's the local council, has retained the liability for somebody, for anybody riding the trails, which we don't bear any liability there. But how did you get down to £90?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I spoke to someone who's in the Belmont club, which is local to us, League Woods in Bristol, up that way, and they said they'd managed to get their insurance for £95. And I didn't quite believe them because I was paying £450. I went back to Zurich, said that they didn't shift until I got the policy document from their policy agreement, emailed it to Zurich, and they went, okay, fine, we'll do it for 95 quid. So yeah, I think until you have a like for like policy in front of them with a completely different number, but I think there's a lot of scope. I'm sure people are paying all kinds of different amounts of money just to kind of, here's the standard conditions the FE asked for, you know, what is a standard policy? Because when I went through the process initially, they made out that they'd never done a policy like this in their lives before. You know, it was completely new.
Yeah. I found that I can't remember who it was I was dealing with. Certainly, they were very helpful, and I had to go through quite a few people before I got somebody that that knew what I was talking about in relation to trail building and what have you. But yeah, that's I wouldn't mind maybe get my email address through Robin. If you sent me a copy of that policy, because ours will be coming up for renewal pretty soon, and I would be keen to kind of, especially if I could see it was 350 quid.
Well, I mean, one of the things I said to Robin was, if everyone's got policies with Zurich, if you could get like a collective policy across, right, and it'd probably be even cheaper. But who knows?
Well, I'll definitely hit you guys up after the meeting. But you know, in the medium term, whatever that means, you know, fairly soon, I'd really like to get a knowledge sharing platform set up where we can, you know, upload these sorts of things and have discussion with each other. And share that sort of stuff electronically, which is, you know, very much a priority. Tim, you had your hand up briefly.
Just one thing before I go. Yeah. The other thing I'd be keen, because I think we're all in similar situations. Tools. It'd be good if, as a collective, we could get some sort of an arrangement with, you know, someone that the manufacturer tools for us at a decent price. You know, especially, you know, the kind of the standard trail tool that we all use. We had to get them custom made locally, and it was expensive enough, you know. A lot.
Fair enough. Totally. Tim?
I think I just still had my hand up from before. I didn't realise I had to put my hand down. Actually.
Okay, cool. Anyone else? Cool. Okay, I'll ask a couple of questions, because one, Grant. So how many man hours do you think it took to set up as a CIO? How daunting a task was that?
Just the CIO part. Well, yeah, it took a reasonable amount of time. The Charities Commission website's pretty good, right? They have template constitution documents, and the thing that takes the time is the constitution document. But they've got something you can kind of pick and adapt, and you know, they'll have like option A or option B for this part, you know. So that wasn't too bad. What took a few goes at was actually getting the charitable purposes approved as a real charitable purpose. So probably had about 4 or 5 goes at that before we landed on something acceptable by the Charities Commission. I referenced something I think the Ride Sheffield had, but the key thing, it was kind of like healthy outdoor pursuit for public benefit or something like that. I'd have to look exactly what the wording is, but that then went through, and I know Ride Bristol that contacted me at one point because they were doing the same thing and had asked what the charitable purpose was so they could have a similar thing. But once you've got all those bits, it's not that difficult, to be honest. And then you're just picking things like how often is your committee going to meet, stuff like that, and how, you know, what do you do if you disband your charity, etc., etc. But yeah, not too bad. The constitution's the most time-consuming thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I should be finding out fairly soon. Brilliant. Just by the way, Kieran Foster from Cycling UK just joined. You got a shout out earlier, and thank you from Grant in his presentation, but you missed it. But you're on mute, clearly.
Apologies. Sorry, apologies. Yes, I am here. Sorry, I came in a bit late. And sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm just saying, Grant was singing your praises earlier in his presentation.
I was just saying thank you when we had all the trouble with the residents in Roeborough.
Oh yeah, well, I think actually heading that off with the BHS, and I think the thing that I've increasingly learned. I mean, obviously, I've been playing in this advocacy game for about 20 years now, and everything's about people. As long once they see you as a human being, and you know, can sit down for a pint with them, everything changes in my experience. Hence, I sit on the committee of the local bridleways group with the horse riders now. So there's little things like that. If I say constructively, within Cycling UK, we obviously, there was some history of them being involved and dabbling in some ways with the trail building stuff. Back in the MB UK days, I was involved in quite a lot of trail building with single traction. I think constructively, it's not the place for Cycling UK to be at the moment. I think we should need to be pushing the access agenda, and I think it's really positive that this group is forming with a focus actually on the trail building rather than the access. But I think there's obviously some significant crossover, and hopefully, you know, we can all work together on that big push, which I'm already speaking to Robin about.
Cool. Thank you, Kieran. I really appreciate that. That's really good to hear. Any questions for Grant before I move on?
I do. I was interested by, also, commending on the work you've done. Obviously, a lot going on in, you've been busy.
Manon, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, so I'm Manon. I guess I've been learning more and more about trail advocacy space over the last 3 years now. 2020 first started diving in and learning about different groups around the UK. Obviously, I'm sure a few of you have seen Trails on Trial, where we went and talked to different groups around the UK. And amazing to see everything that's going on. Feels like there's real momentum around.
Yeah, well, Trails on Trial was a real inspiration for me getting off my arse and doing this, so thank you.
Well, yeah, and thank you to the groups we spoke to in there as well, who obviously have been, showing the way and showing what can be done. I had a question. Don't know how niche it is. I'm sure quite a few groups come across it. So I'm involved with North Cardiff Trails. There's a couple of us on this call who have set up. We got approached by Natural Resources Wales through the conservation team, because there's various land ownership around Cardiff in the woodlands, but there's quite a few SSSIs and special areas of conservation. So there's environmental concerns, and something we're being asked by landowners, or something we're going to think about, is trying to focus riders onto, the main trails. And I was interested in hearing what you're saying. Obviously not wanting to use your time to close trails, but you've had, it's encouraging to hear how when you've made, official trails and focused your efforts on trails, then riders go to them. And I guess I was wondering if that's been entirely organic, or if you, what communication you might have had with the riding community, if this is what we're trying to do, we're trying to focus on these trails, or has that just happened entirely organically over time?
Once you put yourself up on social media and do something, you inevitably get people who support you and all behind the idea, and then you get people who critique absolutely everything and prefer it to be the way it was with the wild trails. It's amazing how many people put requests in for things they want on the trails but never turn up to anything. But to do with the wild trails, I think the first year they were put in place, all we kind of did was link up existing wild trails. We didn't really improve them particularly, but immediately you got the benefit of the fact that you had a really long trail top to bottom, whereas before you'd kind of have like a section of wild trail, then you'd be back on a bridleway, and you'd be going on another little one. So there were lots of little bits rather than whole trails, and so even then the experience was slightly better. And I think the following year, when we really were able to start putting in some berms, putting some features, then they already started to be better than what was there originally. And because we were building based on FE guidance that it had to be, stone and mud, not wood, a lot of the things that were there in the past, which I showed some of the pictures, they were pretty ropey. I think people were glad to see the back of some of those things, to be honest. So it didn't take that long for people to focus on the main trails. We can never get rid of the wild trails. I think the cycle that tends to happen is when there's a school holiday, particularly Easter, May half term, they suddenly appear in various places. And that's why I'm quite keen to get more for young people involved, because probably the average age of our committees now is 50, right, or approaching something like that. And a lot of the young guys want to dig, and have occasionally joined us, but we're not fully set up for it. And I think there's probably 10 to 20 kids we could get every week digging if we wanted to. And that naturally leads on to them doing the things they want, be happy with it. And that's where the main wild trail issue for us is anyway, to be honest.
I think, and just to add to that point, and it's something that I've heard Matthew Cox said, who's one of Grant's co-founders, talk about, who leads all the dig days, is, it was really important that they stayed on side with the community. So if they were seen to be sort of grassing up the wild trails, it made it much less likely that the community would work with them, turn up for dig days, be cooperative, even though perhaps that might have been what Forestry England wanted them to do in terms of telling them about any new wild trails. Is that fair, Grant?
Yeah. They definitely asked us a number of times to spend time on dig days closing wild trails, but we stuck to the line that we'll make the official trails as good as possible. We're not getting into we're not diverting the little resource we have on the days to do the dig days to walk around the forest and shut wild trails, which could be a long way away from the main trails. And in the end, that was kind of accepted as a way of doing it. The FE actually, when there was all the problem with the residents, they actually employed a guy once a week to come and shut wild trails. And they spent a lot of money doing that, and I think realised it was just futile. They just reopened, and it wasn't really worth it. And actually, over the long term, they closed themselves because they just got worse. They got overgrown, and they kind of disappeared. And there's very few left comparative to what was there originally.
I think that's a really nice example where you say you've obviously got the Strava screenshots. And I've heard it in other places as well. You focus on certain trails, make them really nice, and riders want to ride those trails then, and then it kind of happens. It's good to know, that it does work that way. It's nice to have.
It definitely did work.
Cool. Any other questions for Grant?
Jo has her hand up.
Oh yeah, Jo does, as does Anthony, but Jo, go first. Oh, Jo, you're on mute still.
Sorry, Anthony's had his hand up for a while. Please go first, Anthony.
Thanks, Jo. I just wanted to say that on the safeguarding point, I used to run like the volunteer trail group in Bristol, which was kind of a predecessor to Ride Bristol, albeit nothing like as organised or anything. And we had DV students coming out digging with us for quite a while. We had a group of 3 or 4 of them, and I don't think we underwent any sort of formal safeguarding training. We were talking about 10, 15 years ago, when that sort of stuff was much less, people were thinking about that much less than they are now. But stuff like DBS checks and things, yes, they insisted on all that happening. And that was all sort of funded and accessed through DV. So that's a potential avenue to explore if you go back to those students who want to do it as part of their DV. The other thing is if you've got contacts at your local council as well, this isn't a trail building thing, but I've run like a CIC more recently, and we've been offered safeguarding training free online through our local council as part of their sort of volunteer services. So it's not necessarily going to translate brilliantly to an outdoor setting. I think it's more people delivering food parcels and that sort of thing, but there might be safeguarding training available through them as well.
Okay, no, thanks. That's really useful. I didn't think of the county council, to be honest.
Yeah, it sounds like a big scary thing, and I know it's another headache and stuff, and on top of everything else you're dealing with. But my experience is it's relatively straightforward, and then when it's done, it opens up more possibilities for getting younger people involved with digging, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. No, that sounds good. Did you have to have any sort of like specific policy in place or anything like that, or you just?
No, I don't think we ever did, to be honest. I think that sort of stuff was well off my radar back then, and probably well off everyone's radar to a greater extent than it is now. It's not necessarily a good thing. I mean, it must, it's, but yeah, it was probably pretty easy to kind of find a template safeguarding policy for an outdoor setting and adapt that, I'd imagine.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have a look.
Go on then, Joe.
Hey, thank you, Grant. So, Joe Atkinson, Wiley, Forestry in South Wales, linked to risk of riders, near Cwmcarn. So, 2 questions, if I may. First one, do you have any problems with motocrossers? And if so, how do you deal with those?
Not a big problem. It's periodically there'll be some guys will go up there, but it's pretty rare. I'd say like we hear about it maybe 3 times a year, something like that. And it's not a frequent thing. Perhaps more frequent's been the like motorbike type things that we've seen up there occasionally. But no, it's not really a big problem, to be honest.
No one has the problems with those guys like you do, Joe.
Oh, yeah, lucky if we're down to 3 a week. And they're normally riding up the trails as you're riding down them as well. And it's not good. So the second question was, or sort of questions were around the pump track. And I was just wondering sort of more about who owns it, who's responsible, who's liable, and did you need planning permission? Did you get the council involved and things like that?
Yeah. It was a whole big thing, and it was a strange thing because I had quite a passion to do it because it's in my village, and I've ridden them all over various places and wanted to do it. Matt Coxhead was really keen to do it, but it wasn't the whole of the committee, right? So some of them were completely focused on Rover and the trails, but some of us wanted to get interested in that. And there were other people in the village who were quite keen to get involved. So I mentioned Jack, Cheddar Experiment and the band, and did a couple of like events in the village where we had an indoor skate park and stuff. So there's quite a lot of momentum that side. But we had to meet the parish council and float the idea before we even started because it's their land. And they said, yeah, we like the idea of it, we'll support it. Then we basically contacted Velo Solutions for a kind of like provisional design, which they did, which I think was a couple of thousand initially to get that done. And we then used that for planning application, which took forever, and went backwards and forwards. We got planning permission, and then we found out from, because it's right next to Cheddar Reservoir, it's a really nice location. We found out there's a huge culvert as part of the reservoir running right under where the site we just got planning permission for, and Bristol Water basically put kibosh on the whole thing and said, no, we don't want anything built on top of it. So we kind of had to go back to the drawing board and find another spot on this playing field, reapply for planning. We found out there's pipes absolutely everywhere under the playing field because it's right next to a reservoir. And we found this strange shape area which didn't have anything on it, didn't have a rugby pitch on it. And we managed to get planning for that. Velo Solutions did an amazing job coming up with a design for this kind of specific area. I mean, if you look at it on an aerial view, it's kind of really strange why we put it where we put it, because it's not right next to the skate park where we wanted to originally. So yeah, we got planning. It was really, really hard work. I went to so many parish council meetings. There were 3 parish councillors that decided they really didn't want it. There was a huge risk liability problem. And this was happening during COVID. And what I ended up doing was they were doing their parish council meetings on Zoom. And so I asked people who supported it to join. They had 150 people join the parish council meeting. They'd never seen so many people on a meeting. And there were kids, and there was people talking about it, how they really wanted it. And I think from that point, it kind of was like, okay, let's let it go. But one councillor still objected and raised it to the county council. So I had to go to the county council special planning meeting or whatever and present the case for it. And they unanimously voted in support of it. And that was kind of at the end of the planning, but it took forever. I went to probably about 15 parish council meetings, loads of stuff to do with that. But then everything else wasn't too bad. We got funding we were quite fortunate in that they're building the Hinkley Point nuclear power plant sort of near where we are. And 2 of the quarry, or the main quarry supplying all of the material, is in Cheddar. So the National Grid gave us funding. the quarry actually supplied us with, to us, what it would have cost £50,000 worth of materials. So that all the Type 1, all the tarmac, they delivered it on site. They had 100 lorries drop it all off for free, which was amazing. We got 35,000 from British Cycling. We got £20,000 from Hinkley Point Fund. We raised about £12,000 doing gigs in the village. Yeah, so it was a big old thing, and it was very, very painful at stages, but it's phenomenal now. And you go down there, and it's constantly got kids on it. And what was really encouraging is on the opening day, we lent this kid a bike. We had some bikes from British Cycling to do the opening event, and he's now incredible. Right, a year and a half, 2 years later, he can clear all the gaps, no problem. He's like doing, he doesn't do 360s out yet, but he's not far off. And that's in 2 years, and he's like 15. So it is amazing what it's done in the village, and everyone's got BMXs.
That's amazing. You almost put me off at one point, but you've just really inspired me.
Yeah. It's great now. Now it's done. It's phenomenal. It's really, really, and they did a great job building it. It's considering it's a fairly small space. They got a lot of tracking and a lot of transitions you can do and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Hannah, you've had a question for a while. Were you still on mute? I think maybe.
Yeah. Sorry. Slow buttons. Yeah. Sorry. Not really a question. It was back to the safeguarding. And I know it all seems like a probably administrative hassle at the moment, but I think that it's potentially a real issue once you've got stuff up and running. We've got Leeds Urban Bike Park near us, and last time I was there I suddenly realized this is the perfect space to be a predator, because mountain bike culture is so like, oh, let me help you fix your bike, oh, there's a problem, oh, here, have my grips. Like, it is the perfect space to groom particularly vulnerable kids. And at Leeds, there are loads of them out there whose parents have just kicked them out for the day. And that, it's a problem waiting to happen once the wrong people clock that the opportunity is there. So although safeguarding might seem like an administrative hassle at the moment, I can see that it's really worth kind of trail associations doing, because if you build it and they come, you want the right people to come and you to be prepared, I think. So, yeah. That was all. It was the first time it occurred to me when I went to Leeds.
I'd rather do it the right way as well. It'd just be great if someone's already set it all up, got a policy, knows how to do it. Yeah, a bit like the Constitution document. Happy to share ours if you've got something we can use. Or recognise provider.
Yeah, I'm from Single Track Mountain Bike Magazine. We definitely don't have any of this stuff. But okay. I would imagine that the people that run the shop at Leeds will have done stuff, because they had the whole Yorkshire Bike Library thing going on, and they do a lot of interactions with the kids there. So yeah, there must be policies.
I think what we're collectively finding, certainly from talking to lots of different groups, is that the people that we have contractual relationships with, i.e. the landowners, are taking this much more seriously year on year, and actually, looking at it from a central level rather than a local level or a regional level. And therefore they're insisting on these sorts of policies. So it's not that, what's happening as a result, if these policies don't exist, is that they're not able to run dig days with, minors on them, for example, whereas perhaps 2-3 years ago, they would have just gone ahead anyway, if that made sense. But yeah, it's becoming, and safeguarding is just one of many areas where we, increasingly being asked to professionalise, if that makes sense. But hence us, sharing knowledge about doing so, which is great. James, do you want to go next? And you're also on mute. I know you're not.
Okay, I'm temporarily unmuted. Good evening, everybody. James from Malvern Trails Association. Grant, I just wanted to say, fantastic, quite inspirational, and it seems like you've done a tremendous amount of work in quite a short period of time. So yeah, well done. Honestly, that's amazing. I wanted to ask about your committee. you said it was a small committee, but that picture at the beginning, it looked like it was a huge number of people, like 15. And how did you motivate them all to, you know, give up some of their valuable time to work towards the cause and the trails? Because I can ask loads of people locally, and nobody seems willing really to give over time here. But if you put on a trail clearing day, you know, 15 or 20 will join. But we've got quite a big community here. So, yeah, how did you get everybody motivated to join the committee?
There's varying degrees of involvement, right? Definitely. But we're quite lucky in that there's some pretty well-established long-term groups that cycle. I can see Stuart's on here as well. You know,
you got to be careful what you say.
Yeah, well, you know, he's one of the guys who is phenomenal at keeping a group of guys. I forget even the acronym. It's got MBA, Mountain Biking and Beer Association or something, that he runs online, and he's been going for years and years in Weston. And so there's some quite committed bikers. We've got the same from Heath, and Matt Coxhead, who's local, who Robin mentioned, is, you know, was building trails up there years and years ago, and is being fantastic in, you know, running a lot of the trail stuff. So we've got a group of, say, 4 or 5 people pretty committed. We've also been very lucky when we've kind of done shout outs for, we need someone who's good at graphic design, right? And then Colin pops up, who owns a graphic design company, and goes, I'll do all your signs for you, no worries. You know, so stuff like that. And it's just through the social media. And then I put a shout out, have we got any accountants? And our treasurer came forward, who's like a commercial accountant with BT. So we've been quite fortunate, just asking for specific things, and people have come forward and offered time. But I would still say the bulk of work is pretty much done by me and Matt in terms of the administration and running the dig days. And then Stuart and Howard have been phenomenal at fulfilling the monthly trail inspection. So I don't know if everyone else has the same requirement of the FE, but we have to, you know, ride the trails and write up a trail inspection report every month, which is pretty time consuming. And yeah, so Stuart and Howard, between them, have been doing that solidly for the last few years, which is a good day once a month between, you know, one of them to do that. So it's great that they do it. Another thing I'd point out about that is we took the FE document that you use for trail inspections. I don't know if everyone has to use the same thing. It took us forever to fill the thing in. So we basically did a trail map of our own. And what we do now with a felt tip pen is go, there's an issue here with an arrow, and say what the issue is. And there's an issue here, that's it. And then it gets scanned and sent to the FE each month, which saves, I don't know, Stuart's on, I don't know if you can say anything, but it saves loads of time in terms of doing it. But I mean, back to the committee, I think we've just been very lucky with the people involved. One thing I do worry about is everyone's getting older, right? As I said, the average age of our committee must be 50, right? And getting more young people involved would be great. Somehow, and they're really keen to do the dig days. I really want to get the DFE students involved. You know, going to the pump track, there's so many kids who ride on the track, getting involved in mountain biking, to see almost like a way at some point in the future it can sort of continue on. Because I do fear that, like, if Matt or I, you know, Howard and Stuart say can't be bothered anymore, or one of us gets run over by a bus or moves away, it'll just stop. And that is the reality. And I don't know if other people have had experience of kind of handing over the organisation to a new group, but at the moment I can't see how we do that.
No, that's really good. That's very thorough, and a lot of the things you say are, yeah, I can see that happening, which is why Malvern's Trail Association hasn't grown more, because not enough people are, I can see that not enough people are willing to give the time long term to make it work. So even though we've got a fantastic community here and a maybe amazing legacy with world champions and, you know, world level riders, everyone rides for themselves. There's a real sort of selfish attitude about their precious time to ride their bikes, and so committing to something else would then take too much time. But I'll keep asking and keep looking and keep putting something out on the Facebook page to see if those people are there. And then, yeah, hopefully we'll move forward too. Thank you.
Yeah, but I just hope with some of the things which everyone has the same stuff to do, whether there's a way of saving time on the admin side by sharing the same stuff, because it does feel like there's a lot of time spent on stuff which isn't really directly helping build trails.
The Zurich thing, the insurance thing, that sort of made me think immediately, could we, if we all got in touch with Zurich and said, right, we want, you know, a sort of a group quote for trail dig days and for riding the trails, can we get a better rate? Can it be recognized with like the 125 groups all wanting insurance? Then surely we can bring the price down.
Definitely.
Other insurance providers are available. In all honesty, actually, the guys that Dirt Farm use and other people I've put in touch with them seem to have very good things to say to them. But it does seem that there are very few players in the market that are at least offering sensible quotes and actually taking this sort of business on. So absolutely. But it sounds like you just put the hand up to lead that working group, James. Before I move on, I would really like the Ride Mendips trail inspection reports are really good. You should have a look. They are really cleverly done, and it must save so much time. It's really good. And then before we move on, another question. Just to say, I have been putting a shout out for the last couple of months for skills that we need at a central level. So just if any of you do know a commercial lawyer that's a keen mountain biker and would have any time available to help us out, that would be really useful. That's a live requirement. But in future, it would also be good to know personal injury lawyers, construction managers that have got experience of construction design management regulations and health and safety law, safeguarding experts, which we talked about on this call. Again, if we had one of those that we could access centrally, that would really help all of you out. Planning consultants, so ideally of experience of planning applications for things like mountain bike trails, of which obviously there are not going to be many of them around the country, but if we can find one of them, that's really going to help everyone out. And again, environmental surveyors and ecologists, people with experience of doing environmental impact assessments, again, ideally for mountain bike trails, but again, unlikely. That would be a really useful skill for us to have access to and to share with all of you. But now I've said that, I'll hand over to Chris to ask his question.
Again, getting a habit for this, it's not really a question or a comment. One thing that we've used when we've been trying to break the back of the tortuous admin that you have to do is AI. It comes in really handy for filling in those tranches of stuff that are just standard answers to things. So we've all got websites, we've all got stuff we've written on Facebook and things like that, which kind of build the fabric of what you're about and what you're doing. You can feed that in, pose the question to it and get it spat out, and then just get it checked off by the committee to make sure that you're not dropping any clangers in there and things like that. But it means that you're not sitting, as we all have done, at a laptop until the wee small hours filling in terminal bloody forms when you can get the systems to do it for you with a bit of tailoring, a bit of tweaking. So we've done that quite usefully on a few things. It does the job for you. Certainly on things like CIO applications and charity commission stuff. I mean, Grant, you'll know that about 80% of that is just what are you, who are you, what do you do, all those kind of things. You've written that everywhere already. You just need to tweak the language a little bit, and it just breaks the back of it a little bit. So that was just a suggestion for that admin load that we all face in trying to make ourselves a bit more official in what we do.
There you go, James. You can have an AI on your committee. Chris, before you go, you're like the third or the fourth chairman of Peak District MTB, right?
Yeah, third. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, third.
So can you help, like, to Grant's question about how's Peak District MTB managed to hand the baton on at least 3 times and regenerate itself?
Yeah, well, we do it with like a fight to the death every 6 months or so. We just go at it with maces, whoever can get the weapon first. No, we've kind of fallen into about a 2-3 year cycle of moving to a new chair. Not least because of the reasons of attrition. Everyone gets tired and it's quite a lot of work to do and those kind of things. But it keeps things fresh as well. And how do we how do we drive that enthusiasm? I don't know. The three chairs, excuse me, that have been there. So Dan Noble was my predecessor, and Paul Richardson, who many of you will know, was his. Paul's not so much involved anymore. He does still volunteer on the local access forum for us. Still does loads of work there. Dan's still very actively involved in the committee. We've been around for a long, long time. On Petersham MTB, the secretary James Irwin. He's our head spade. He does most of the digging and organising the dig days for us. He's been on the committee for a long time. So is it that we've got fresh new blood coming in, or is it just that we've fallen into a rhythm of passing it round a little bit? I think we've kind of fallen into a rhythm of passing it round a little bit. But what that has done is it's meant that it's taken away the attrition on the individual, which can really, I mean, it's the hardest part, isn't it? When those of you who've chaired, and see Henry's on here as well. Henry probably shared the same experience. There's a lot of work goes into being a chair. You're the one that people ask the questions of. You're the one that has to put your name on things, and some of the rewarding stuff from the role perhaps drops away a little bit by moving it around and passing the baton, and that becoming just the norm at Petersham MTB. We've broken the back of that a little bit, really. I've been there for a year now. I'm not going to be arrogant enough to say that come our AGM in December, I'll be voted back in as chair. But the mood music is such that people want me to hang around for a little bit, which is quite nice. But then probably in 18 months' time, another year's time, I'll be looking to see somebody else on the committee that we've developed and that's had the experience, that's seen what we do, has shown some real aptitude and passion for it, may want to take it on. I think certainly part of it on my point of view is almost a reluctance to hand it on because things get done differently. But that's just ego. That's my ego creeping in, and I'm sure others will have had that as well. You want to go, I want this is our baby. We've done it this way for so long. I want it to change. But you know what? That's how things evolve. You get new ideas in, you get new people onto the committee, you get new membership in there, and allow it to happen because new ideas is what we need. Certainly mountain biking's changed significantly in the 10 years that I've been involved in advocacy. It's certainly changed massively in the years I've been riding a bike, so yeah, it's a freshness, I guess. How have we made people do it? I don't know. I mean, like, where have you found the people from? I mean, you obviously sounds like you've got like a big enough pool of people that people sort of emerge from the swamp. Well, I mean, we've got. I mean, on the socials, we've got about getting on for 11,000 members on Facebook now. I don't know how many official are signed up on things. We've got loads on Insta. We've got loads on X, Twitter. We've got enough people out there, and we're very driven in talking about what we do quite proactively. It's timely, actually. Just yesterday, we put out a call for new committee members saying we need fresh blood. What we really need is not bald, middle-aged man like on the committee. We need more women and others on the committee. So we put a call out yesterday for new committee members with just a daft little article, and it's proven relatively successful. So we'll run some taster sessions on the committee. Come along, see what you think. You don't have to do anything, but if you just want to tell us we're rubbish, that's valuable as well, so yeah, we'll just often put a call out, but we do get people just asking to get involved. Anything I can do to help? Oh, well, you can go and sit and answer all these emails we get on a Saturday morning if you like. Okay, we don't give them boring jobs like that, but yeah, we'll just invite people on and taste it and try it out, and if they stick, they stick. Certainly no anger on our part if they don't want to hang around, but try people out. If they want to hang around, they can do.
Yeah, makes sense. Brilliant.
You've got to make it not. You've got to make it not be a job. That's the thing. It's not a full-time job. We're all volunteers doing this. You've got to keep some fun in it. So you can't then just treat it like a job for people and make it dull. Just let people bring what passion they have for the love of mountain biking, and then if we can throw our support behind what they're doing, they're great. They'll drive their own energies on.
Brilliant. That's really useful. Henry from Ride Sheffield, it's your own call. I don't know if you've got anything to say about, because you're again like the third chair of Ride Sheffield, I think.
I'm actually the one and only chair of Ride Sheffield.
Oh, yeah.
Founder and God knows how many years of it. But yeah, so probably not much help with that one, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I've been dropping some stuff in the chat about safeguarding. I'm kind of happy to look at that as I'm like a designated safeguarding officer as part of my job. So I have to kind of stay on top of that stuff. And we have probably not robust quite enough policies with Ride Sheffield, but it's something that we're trying to work on. So we do work with young people, but we have a disclaimer that we use. And we have, and just making sure that we have DBS people when we have young people attending, and that we have contact with their parents beforehand as well. And also ideally that people come along with their parents, because that gives you extra people to dig as well.
Cool, thank you. Manon, you've had your hand up for ages. Oh, you're still muted. Sorry.
It's actually for a comment in the chat that was, I think, interesting for Grant. Well, there's one about risk assessments being if the rate of change is slow and you're not finding many issues, if you can amend the frequency of the inspections. So if things aren't changing, in theory, you don't have to inspect as much. There's a comment in the chat with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the requirements placed on us. I mean, we would try and drop the frequency, and it's one of the things we've raised, but up until now, it's been a fairly solid requirement that we do them monthly. And in fairness, the amount of times you have trees falling over trails or, it's probably not a million miles off. You might be able to drop it to bi-monthly, but generally there's stuff that happens.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
David, Lily, I don't know if you're still on the call and want to give us a landowner's perspective on the importance of trail inspections.
And just because it's Dave Liddy's other comment about whether the planning permission. So yeah, if Dave does want to talk, I'm not sure.
Dave, you might not want to talk, which is totally fine if you don't.
But then the planning permission question is also interesting, Grant, if you have had to get planning permission for the trails themselves.
No, we haven't done planning permission. I don't know. Yeah, it's never come up in any discussion with anybody that we need planning permission for the trails. Maybe because it's privately owned, I don't know. And they've given permission for the trails potentially, but no, never come up.
Yeah, so what I've sort of gleaned from talking to lots of people across the country is it just seems to be totally random. It's down to whether a local authority, i.e. your local council, decides that they want planning permission for those trails or not. Some councils seem to ask, some councils don't ask. Obviously, if you ask a council if you need planning permission, you're likely to trigger them to say yes. So there's a sort of sort of founding, so like a nasty catch 44 situation there. But yeah, it does seem to be random. And again, the level of planning permission required, sometimes it's just about things, Grant, like your tool shed or your car park. Sometimes it's for mountain bike trails, full stop. Sometimes it's for the specific mountain bike trails you're building and the features on them. There's lots of different.
As part of the planning application for the shed, though, I walked the planning officer up and down the trails. And he never said anything. So just
well, he hasn't said anything yet. Let's hope. But it does seem to be really random. But I think it's certainly the expectation is, and again, I don't, it may be down to your landowner. Your landowner might specify that they, that you should go to your local council and tell them that you're going to build trails or you've got trails and ask for planning permission. It obviously is possible to get retrospective planning permission. That's certainly what Dirt Farm did, and they were in the middle of the Brecon Beacons National Park. So it has fairly stringent planning there, and they managed to get through it. But the actual, the petition they were able to produce with the level of public support that they showed, I think was an important part of them getting that planning permission. Yeah, I'll shut up. Who is next? James Tatlow, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, hi there, everybody. James Tatlow from down south. So I build in Tilgate and St Leonard's Forest. We're the complete other end of the spectrum to a lot of you guys appear to be. We have almost no formal group. We have a Facebook page. Sometimes people tell you about trail work that they're doing, but it's all totally under the radar. And I'm sort of looking at the way your guys are approaching having to do risk assessments, having to do applications, all of this. How do you go about convincing the riders and the guys building that they're going to lose, maybe 2/3 of their trails and be expected to come and, work, fill out paperwork, everything, rather than carry on as they do now?
Well, from our perspective, a lot of it was to do with that initial effort of going around all the different larger riding groups and just sort of canvassing for support. You can never contact everyone because there's so many people involved. We were fortunate that Matt Coxhead got involved because he knew a lot of the people that were doing a lot of the digging, and sort of talked to them around the benefits of it. And now 2 of the main guys that built 2 of the wild trails are involved in the trail building. So I think it's just a question of talking to people, outlining the benefit of doing it, which one of the main arguments that we made was the fact that you won't have this cycle of build, destroyed, start again, build, destroyed. You actually build something and it's going to stay there. Unfortunately, that argument gets diluted when Forestry England destroy the trails with their felling machines. But yeah, it did largely hold with a lot of members. But clearly, there are people out there who would still say, "Oh, it was better when there was wild trails everywhere and I could just stick in a jump whenever I wanted." I don't think you'll ever convince everyone, but certainly we've got a lot of the main people who are involved in the digging. And to be honest, there's not that many that in the wood that actually did all the digging. So if you can get 2 or 3 of those on board, that sort of settles the argument.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie, it's going to depend on how much pressure those wild trails are under at the moment, and if they are being destroyed or if they're being left alone. Obviously, the incentives will change depending on how the landowner is treating them, and then also, in Grant's case, because of the pheasant shoots. That actually did put a lot of the existing wild trails off limits, although that may not be the same in every area. You may find that actually if you try and go official, all of your wild trails are okay, or you may find that you try and go official, they say no and none of them are okay. Like both outcomes are possible, but I suppose you don't know till you ask. Do you want to come back on that, Jamie, or you happy?
Yeah, I mean, we do go through the cycle of build, destroy, build, destroy. Certainly since COVID, there was a rash of building, which the forestry came in and destroyed. But for the last couple of years, it feels like they've ignored us. Whether that's just good luck, or we've sort of educated a lot of the guys that do the building to build it as best they can within the regulations we understand. No janky wood and silly gap jumps and things. But it's a ticking time bomb every time we go out there. If there was a way to make it more official, then it's probably a benefit in our area.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the one thing I'd caution you with is it is, although it is absolutely about building trails in the right way, not fast, no fast access onto bridleways, no gap jumps, everything you've talked about, but it is totally down to, the receptiveness of someone local within, that landowner organisation. And if you don't have that, it's going to be really tough. But yeah, maybe you will.
Maybe.
Kieran, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so I was just going to come back on the planning point. So my understanding, having discussed this sometimes over the years, is that new trails can fall within the definition of private ways constructed for the purpose of forestry. So therefore benefit from general permitted development order exclusion from planning permission. The argument being that both for a habitat management and recreation. Sorry, I don't want to sound too rambly here. Recreation falls within the definition of forestry under the Forestry Acts, and then secondly, also that recreational provision and managing people on land in order to protect the habitat and reduce impact on the environment. And then also the guidance for forestry also very clearly talks about public access. So setting out walking and cycling routes within a forest can fall within the definition of forestry purposes, so therefore allows you to create private ways within a forest. Hopefully that helps. I can follow that up with some email information linking to the regs and legislation.
Yeah, that would be amazing, because there's, I don't know if they're on, I don't think they're on the call, but there's a group called Cafe Side down near in Holden Forest, near Exeter, that are going through planning permission for their trails at the moment, and having that to hand would be really useful, Kieran. So I will follow up with you afterwards.
Yeah, it does come down to sometimes a bit of an argument each way, but I remember having this discussion with 20 years ago originally, and it was decided that it fell within the purposes of forestry.
That's really useful. Very, very useful. And it'd be great if you could share that, Kieran. I was just going to say that there are such things as permissive paths on where there's on private land. So the private landowners can create formal or formal and informal agreements with groups to allow permissible paths which can be used.
Class E, I'm just looking now. Class E of Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Orders 2015.
Brilliant. No hands up. Anyone got any more questions? Cool. Well, look, this is the time we were going to try and hand it over to the floor. So you could either ask questions of me and what I'm up to, or of each other. So does anyone want to ask any questions in that context?
A question out of context. How muddy is the Forest of Dean going to be at the weekend?
I don't know if Andy was on the call or not, but he's probably been digging in the forest. I'm not sure he is, but yeah, probably quite is the answer, I'm guessing. Cool. Like, no one got any questions to ask anyone? I'm just trying to think who's on the call that I can ask a question of.
It's got a hand up.
Well, I've got my hand up.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, if you're looking for people with certain sets of expertise, it's always worth asking on the single track forum, because there is the whole gamut of every career imaginable there. So if you ask, you never know, you might find somebody who is prepared to help you remotely. They're all mountain bikers of some sort. So, good question.
Well, that is a really good idea. Cool. Right, who else can I pick on? Just having a look at the list of participants. I know Dave Evans was on the call earlier. I'm sure lots of you have questions for him, but he obviously is only a few days into the job as the UK Trails project manager. The plan is to get him to present on one of these calls in the next few months. We haven't decided which yet, so he can bring you all up to speed on what he's up to. And there's a press release going out tomorrow with more details of what he's working on in the short term. So that I hope to give you some context on that. Who else can I ask questions of? No one's got any questions for me?
What's the sorry, I came in late, Robin, what's the snappy name, the group that we've come up with? Is it
snappy name is obviously top secrets. It's the UK MTB Trail Alliance.
Like it.
But Ian, who's on this call, Ian Warby, who most of you will know, has very generously offered to let's have the ukmtb.org domain name to use with that, which will work really well. Haven't you, Ian? You haven't reneged on that, have you? take yourself off mute.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's the plan. So I think it'll just helps people find it really quickly.
Yeah, I've got him committed to it publicly now. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, look, if there aren't any questions, then I will end the call. But just to say a couple of things. I mean, one, thank you all for coming. It's been brilliant to have this many people on the first call. I think it's worked quite well. There's a few things I'll take away and try and make better next time. But genuinely, I think it's worked quite well. And thank you all for paying attention and asking such great questions. Two, obviously, thank you very much, Grant. Also, thanks. Brilliant. They all said thanks, Grant, but they all had their microphones on mute.
Yeah, all muted.
And thirdly, obviously, I'm working as hard and fast as I can on getting the central organisation up and running. Kath Goody, who was on the call earlier, has kindly agreed to be a director, as has Ian Warby, as well as giving us his domain name. He's giving us his time, which is brilliant. But if anyone else has any time to give in any way, we would be gratefully recipients of that time. There's a lot for us to do and to get done. James, obviously you're now running the insurance working group, which is brilliant. Thank you. But there's other little working groups I'm sure we could set up. And yeah, thank you very much, guys. And I'll see you all next month.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you
Thanks
all.
so much.
Take care.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks.
All right.
Goodbye.
Bye.